This. See? Look, we've got the book on one side, and we've got the flow chart to help me understand things on the other. Just a little more of that. And let me change the category. Stream information. How in the heck do I even call this? Let's learn, because that's the name of the segment. I'll just do a translation of it. It'd be Nagarjuna's root versus on the middle way, which is several different ways to translate it, but that's at least mostly understandable for an average person. The category is not Animal Crossing. The category is how do I even do this? There's no philosophy category. I typed the P and it asked me if I wanted to put it under politics. That seems terrible. The idea of there being a politics category on Twitch is terrifying. I don't think I ever want to be there. How about just chatting? That's a good general one. Vtuber, EN Vtuber, yes, English, yep. Well, it's not retro, and it's not GameCube. Philosophy? Can I have a philosophy tag? Yes. Can I have a Buddhism tag? Because he was a Mahayana Buddhist. Buddhism is probably the better category, because Buddhist implies that I am a Buddhist. I am not. I just like to read their works and understand them. I was not born into a Buddhist family or anything. Okay. Nagarjuna. I spelled his name right. Yeah, yes, I spelled Nagarjuna. Okay, good. It's kind of insulting to get someone's name wrong. Okay. Let's put these up over here. That's that one. Okay, so first of all, let's just do a general overview of what I'm even talking about. And I find that a good way to understand a lot of things is to put them in a historical context. Looking up a lot of these documents, I find things that articles tell me what they are and have maybe translations of them, but it was kind of like pulling teeth to find out the time period that a lot of this was supposed to take place in. But this part's pretty well understood, which is there was a guy, people called him the Buddha. He lived somewhere in India in the 5th or 6th century BCE, which is 500 or 600 years before zero. Zero is not really a date, but not CE, not like the year 500 or 600, but hundreds of years before that. He said things, and then as it is with a lot of religions, it took a couple hundred years for people to really agree on and write down the things he said. There is a term that refers to the words of the Buddha. I normally see it translated. What is it? It is Tripitaka. That would be the 3 parts. It is, let's see. Oh, it's just Buddha Vakana. It's literally just like Buddha word. So it's the words of the Buddha. So Buddha said some things, and then people wrote them down much later. And there is a distinction between things that they believe were said specifically by him, and a person remembered and then was written down later, or things that merely describe the things that Buddha said, that they maybe add more different emphasis or they add more explanation, because not all the things he said is very easily understood at its face. Some of them were, but not all of them. Some of them were rather short, and you kind of have to read into them. But anyway, there is what's called the Tripitaka. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but it literally means the 3 baskets. Pitaka meaning basket. It means basket in the sense of like a collection. Like a volume is literally a book. but we sometimes refer to collections of things as like it's like a volume of data. It's the same sort of metaphor. The word Pitaka just means collection. So we got 3 collections, Tripitaka. We have from order of old to new. I say new, none of these are new. But in theory, the ones we know that are older have more of a potential of being more accurate. So we have the Sutta Pitaka. Sutta in this case means the same thing as sutra. It's kind of this game where, it was originally written in Sanskrit, and then like it was translated into Chinese, and then it moved over into like Southeast Asia, and then they have a word for it, and then it like moved over into Tibet. It finally crossed the mountains, and then Tibet started independently communicating with the Buddhists in India, and then Buddhism falls out of favor in India, and Indian Buddhists move to Tibet. So it's like this whole complicated thing where not only do people get the transmission one time, they like re-get the transmission, and sometimes the new transmissions don't agree with the old transmissions, and it's this whole complicated thing because all of these things are being translated through like 3 different languages, and they're not simple concepts to begin with. Buddhism is very, I wouldn't say fractured, but diverse is probably the word I'm thinking of, which is you say something like, oh, in Buddhism it's this way, and it's like that's the most almost like a useless statement, unless you're talking about the very, very general things of like, in Buddhism, they believe that there was a person called the Buddha. It's like, yeah, almost all of them do that. Maybe some very specific kinds of Zen Buddhism would argue that like the Buddha wasn't special at all. That's the whole point of it. Like anyone can do it, but that would be a very specific kind of Buddhism. Anyway, Buddha said some things. The things he wrote were divided into 3 parts, or attributed to him, because I will make the argument that the Abhidhamma Pitaka doesn't make sense to have been written by the Buddha. But so Sutta Pitaka, Sutta or Sutra being discourse, it means something along the lines of essay or argument. So when people say Buddhist sutras, generally what they're using them to mean a Buddhist, almost like a scripture, a Buddhist essay. And sutra came to mean to gain an emphasis. Yeah, but the problem is it's not just used to mean discussion, because there's also a thing called a tantra, which is another type of written thing. And tantras have very specific like hallmarks of the genre, in that they're telling you practices to do, and they're telling you rituals to perform. And sutras, when you read, or tantras, when you read them, are very much almost like an instruction manual. Like it'll be a sutra about the yogas, the 6 yogas of Naropa, say. That's one I actually know. And it's literally just like, exercise number 1, here's how to breathe in a way that makes you warmer. Exercise number 2, practice this in your dreams, and eventually you'll be able to control your dreaming. Exercise number 3, and it's like very much like, you want to do this thing, here's how you do this thing. And sutras aren't like that. Sutras are kind of like, they're normally very, I mean, not that tantras aren't flowery too. Tantras have a bunch of very strange imagery in them, because a lot of what a tantra is involves visualizing specific things to help you not lose your focus when you're trying to meditate. It's not all visual. Some of them are like the things you're trying to make yourself experience are feelings. Like I just said, there's a Tumo is a type of breathing meditation that the way you contract your muscles causes a feeling of heat to form in kind of like deep inside your abdomen, and then you just focus on the feeling of heat. There is still visualization involved, but I imagine that people who aren't good at visualizing pictures can probably still follow it, because anyone knows what it's like to feel warm, you know? That's a pretty sensible one. Sutras tend to be written in the form of like a structure that is a character delivering almost like a sermon. Normally either like a fictional character or a character that's long dead. It's almost like we're writing the argument in the form of a play, where like the Buddha. Here's a good example. Here's a good example of it. A one that you would know if you know any sutras would be the Heart Sutra. So here's the very beginning of the Heart Sutra. The noble Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, while practicing the deep practice of Prajna Paramitra, looked upon the 5 skandhas, and seeing they were empty of self-existence, said, "Hear, Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form." Anyway, the point is, it takes the identity of this sort of mythological figure to deliver wisdom to you. And normally sutras aren't big on telling you why something is the case. They're kind of just revealing information at you. Pranja Paramitra meaning perfection of wisdom, and being a whole genre of sutras that are describing to you the way that things exist. And they say a lot of stuff like form is emptiness, emptiness is form, all things are empty, that kind of thing. And sometimes they go a little bit deeper and they say things are empty of independent existence. Things are empty of a word that's sometimes translated as essence. And that's getting a little bit more specific about what they mean, but they generally just say that and move on. Okay, so we have the Sutta Pitaka. We also have the Vinaya Pitaka, which is the basket of monastic law. It's also a fairly old one. It's, well, there's actually a lot of commentaries on these, and I will say, for a commentary from the year 1200, Tsongkhapa actually is pretty descriptive about the stuff he means. Like, it's not that long, but he goes through every line. I think you're going to end up liking Tsongkhapa, which is good, because this interpretation that I'm going to talk about, the Mullah Madama Kakarika's interpretation of what it means to be empty, is it forms a very, very popular doctrine that's accepted by Mahayana, which is to say the Buddhists, the great vehicle. Buddhists that are very into the idea of becoming bodhisattvas, of taking bodhisattva vows, of not just achieving enlightenment for yourself, but what they work towards is enlightenment for all creatures, even if it means delaying your own enlightenment. That's kind of what it means. But to go a step further than that, there's also Vajrayana, which descends from Mahayana. They're normally found in Tibet, but they're definitely not only in Tibet. There are certain kinds of tantric Buddhism that kind of fit in there in a way. These people are very, very like the interpretation that we're going to talk about. So that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to read it, is because to understand almost anything in that sort of Tibetan corpus, they will just say stuff like, as you understand the something interpretation of emptiness. And I'm like, I don't understand that interpretation of emptiness. And that's why I just need to read the book for myself and figure it out. But not just for myself, you know? Hopefully someone else will get it. Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya Pitaka is monastic law. It's very straightforward. It's basically, if you're going to live in a monastery, do these things, don't do these things, and sort of a justification of why monastic life is worth living, but it's a lot of just rules. Seems like a very fundamental, important thing to have if you're big on the monastic life, would be rules to tell people how to live. Because you don't just want anyone calling themselves a Buddhist monk and then not living according to your practices. Okay. Abhidhamma Pitaka, sometimes called Abhidharma. Dharma, Dhamma is sort of like Sutta and Sutra, where they are similar words. You can kind of see where they came from, the similar roots. Abhidhamma Pitaka, I'm going to call it Abhidharma because that's how I know it. The basket of systematic treatises is what it's sometimes called. Scholars agree that it's the most recent section of the Tripitaka because it is specifically explanation of the rest of it. So you get a sutra where the Buddha makes a proclamation, and then the Abhidhamma Abhidhamma Pitaka is sort of about systemizing that. It says that, you know, there are the Four Noble Truths. There is the Eightfold Path. There is this structural framework that these other things make sense in. And it wouldn't make sense for that structural framework to have been written before the things that they were describing were said. You know, at minimum, it has to have been towards the end of the Buddha's life, but most likely after the Buddha's life. That would make sense to me. So the Abhidhamma Pitaka is still considered the words of Buddha, but there is a genre called Abhidharma, which is, it goes a little bit farther. It describes this and tries to describe this in a cohesive way. Like if someone walked up to you and said, okay, so what's Buddhism? It should be like a book that you can hand them that says, this is the goal of the path, this is the path, this is the things that are true, these are the bad things, you're made of, you know, different skandhas, you're made of different aggregates. But a lot of these are very old. Visuddha, oh God, some of these are very hard to say. Anyway, the point is that there's several different, you know, 4th and 5th century, 5th century, 5th century. These are 1100 years, or at least 1,000 years after the Buddha lived. And these people are trying to systemize it. But also, the Pranjaparamitra Sutras find their justification in the Sutta Pitaka. They say their perfection of wisdom is what the Buddha taught. In fact, the most important one, if you're ever going to read any of them, I mean, the shortest one to read is just read the Heart Sutra. It's beautifully written. It's actually pretty nice to read. It gives you most of the ideas, but it's kind of concise about them. The most descriptive is called The Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 Lines. We actually have a copy from the 1st century BCE, which is, I mean, it's still 600 years after the Buddha, but that's considerably old. And because it's long, okay, so just a clarification. I'm saying a lot of dates right now. It's entirely possible for people to argue with me about these dates. This is where I'm getting my dating scheme from. Kanze's 30 years of Buddhist studies. He makes some pretty good arguments. It might turn out that these are not true, but these are at least the earliest known copies of Pranjaparamitra Sutras we have. So, Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 Lines is generally considered to be the first one. And from then on, the sutras were either made larger, which is to say described, or they were made shorter, and that's to say made concise. So the Diamond Sutra, sometimes called the Diamond Cutter Sutra, or the Heart Sutra, are taking sections of the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines and writing the parts that the author thinks are important and leaving out the rest. And in a similar way, I've heard people describe the Heart Sutra as you give it to a person who knows nothing and they come out of it with some understanding, which kind of sounds like what I was talking about before. So, this starts a whole thing with the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. They're frequently commented on. And the reason that's a little bit aggressive. Can I go do this? Yeah, there we go. So here's why I care about Pranjaparamitra, other than the fact it's important. Because the Ornament of Clear Realization is a 4th century book attributed to Asanga. Asanga being an Indian Buddhist that crossed into Tibet. Well, no, sorry. Asanga might have been Tibetan, or is he Tibetan, but he knew Indian? He knew Sanskrit. Let's see. Asanga was... What was his nationality? Okay, so yes, they were Indian and they spoke Sanskrit, but their works were brought over in the 4th century into Tibet, and commentaries were frequently made. Okay, The Ornament of Clear Realization is another one of those books where it's trying to be a summary of Pranjaparamitra, which is trying to be a summary of the sutras. So as such, it almost on its own works as a one-book way to get into the Buddhism, or at least the specific interpretation of Buddhism. Notice, it does not say if it's commenting on the 100K, 25K, or 8K. What am I talking about? Okay, so the Perfection of Wisdoms in 8,000 lines is regarded to be the first currently, but there's also the Perfection of Wisdom in 25,000 lines, and the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 lines, each of them being more explicit and longer versions of the Pranjaparamitra idea. They are the opposite of the Heart Sutra. It's basically the Perfection of Wisdom in 100,000 lines is spelling it out like you're stupid. And that's fine, because this shit is complicated, and the fact that someone will just sit down and tell you what they're trying to tell you is good. But this book became incredibly popular to the point that it became its own genre in Tibet called Lamrim. And Lamrim is the description of the path. It's the steps of the path. It is a roadmap to be a Buddhist. And you have A Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, written by Atisa. Atisa, it says straight up, well, later people say it's quite obvious that Atisa is just commenting on the Ornament of Clear Realization. But in doing so, he kind of made the first book of his genre. You have Gampapa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation, which is kind of the Kagyu, which is a type of faction in Tibetan Buddhism's version of a Lamrim. And then you have an incredibly impressive, incredibly long work, one of the last books that Tsongkhapa wrote. He didn't live very long. He started writing when he was 36, and he wrote for maybe 10, 20 years before he died. Anyway, The Great Treaty on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. If someone wants to read a Lamrim and doesn't mind reading too much, read this one, because this is a lot. It's basically everything that Tsongkhapa thought was important about Buddhism. And he thought about a lot of things. He wrote a lot of diverse books, and this is his masterwork. Here's what I feel like it means to be a Buddhist. It's quite a good one. Maybe we'll get to it sometime. We might not, though. But we now have a problem. We have people who are Abhidharmists who read, not obviously these books, because they weren't around yet, but they kind of have the philosophy of the things that will cause these books to be written. But you also have these people who are kind of going off these books. And we're not going to say that these people are Hinayana. That's kind of an insulting term. We're not going to say that these people are Mahayanists yet, because Mahayana kind of hadn't split off as its own separate type of Buddhism. There were certainly people who had Mahayana ideas, but they were in the same monasteries as non-Mahayana Buddhists. Like, it was basically just, I believe that being the Bodhisattva path is more important. Or I believe that the Bodhisattva path is for me. And the other people are like, no, I want to be like an Arahat. I want to be like the Buddha. I want to be specifically like, transcend for myself, not for other people. I believe that trying to do things for other people is not the correct way. And it wasn't to the point, like later on, when you read some Mahayana works, you get people saying stuff like, the Arahats were foolish. The Bodhisattvas are above them. This is an inferior path. We are the great vehicle, the true vehicle. And like, they hadn't developed that pride yet. It wasn't like our way is correct and your way is inefficient, which in a kind of a Buddhist sense is a way to call someone stupid. You just say that your path is slower. Your path's not as good. And man, to some supposedly enlightened people, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, where they literally stand up, like Tsongkhapa does it. He's like, I am the most enlightened, the most humble. I am the best at having no ego. And it's just like, dude, like you might be correct, honestly. Like, given the stuff he wrote, he was clearly very smart. But just reading it out as it is, specifically in the way that a lot of these books begin with a devotional. So, like, I have to read a lot of books that start off with, like, glorious Tsongkhapa, so smart, so clever, so his words were always true, and he knew the truth of emptiness. And I'm just like, I know you didn't write this about yourself, but it still makes me, just in, like, the modern day, it gives me an impression of you. But yeah, no, a lot of these, especially like the cave yogis, people who lived all by themselves in the wilderness and practiced, they developed phenomenal egos. And I mean, not in the Buddhist sense. They obviously understood the truth of emptiness, but they seem to talk themselves up a lot. So you have conflict between these two groups of people. And thankfully, we have the book we're going to be looking at today is a book explaining the Pranjaparamitra Sutras that specifically argues with Buddhist Abhidharmists. We have it. It's a historical document. It's dated to around 150 CE, so it's pretty old. And it's just, Nagarjuna was Indian, so Buddhism was still popular in India at the time. One second, I'm going to take a drink of water. So, there's a point where Buddhism stops being the default religion of India, and the Buddhists kind of go elsewhere or stop practicing or kind of go undercover because Hinduism takes over. I don't really know the nature of that. It's probably political, probably had to do with some wars. Like all of these religions, they make you seem that you get the impression, at least at first, before you know anything, that they are like beyond earthly matters. But the reason that Buddhism survived in Tibet for so long is they were the state religion. They were enforced by, like, if you didn't allow them to practice, then the government would come down on you. They were funded by the government and protected by the military. Like, they were revered and they were part of the legitimacy of the ruling faction. Like, they were very much involved in politics. I imagine that Buddhism in India was something of the same. So we have this book right here. We have the Mula Madhama Kakarika. We have Madhama, meaning middle way. So what Nagarjuna has kind of done here is he's taken a term that the Buddha used and then kind of used it in a slightly different way, but because it's a term that the Buddha used, obviously it's something that the Buddha believed. Like, the Buddha talked a lot about the middle way. And generally when he uses that, he's talking about the middle way between starving yourself to death and excess. He's talking about a way that isn't just sitting in place all day and wasting away. And what he's referring to is like very harsh asceticism, basically being an ascetic. It's like where you really hurt the body to feed the soul. And he practiced the jhanas, which are very intense visualization and meditation. You can still find stuff on how to do them if you care, but you probably don't want to do the eat only 1 grain of rice a day strategy. That seems like it's not very sustainable. It seems quite painful. So he didn't want to go all that far. He practiced that and discovered it probably wasn't the correct solution. But he also didn't want to go back to being when he was a king, when, you know, he had complete luxury and complete excess, and that didn't seem healthy either. So he described Buddhism and the Eightfold Path as the middle way. When Nagarjuna is talking about the middle way, he's specifically talking about his interpretation of emptiness. It can be considered a middle way between believing that things have independent existence, sort of like a Platonism, where you believe that the forms of things are real and they exist, but it's not that, and it's also not nihilism, where you say that there's no point in anything because nothing exists, what I'm looking at isn't even real, people aren't real, I don't even know if I'm real, getting in your head, like, that's not useful either. This is the middle way between nihilism and the idea that things do really objectively exist. And that's what we're going to talk about. Like, I don't know if anyone has been kind of nihilistic in that way, but when Buddhists say things don't exist, they immediately turn around and say things don't exist, so be really good to people. And that strikes people as weird. It's like, things are fake, but also good karma. Like things don't exist, but also I still go to the store and buy groceries, right? Why would I do that if I don't believe groceries exist? And that's what this is about. This is a specific description of how things don't exist. So the blue on this chart are works that I have access to. Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way is a book from 1995. Root Stanzas the Middle Way is a book from 2004. And Nagarjuna's Middle Way is from 2013. Now, let me just look at what I have here. Okay, Nagarjuna's Middle Way, the most recent one, is an exceptionally good book. I would say you don't even need just a book that's the translation of it, because it's both translation and commentary. And to break down what some of this stuff means, I am going to be using sections from this quite a lot. Not so much that you don't need to buy the book yourself. Like I'm trying not to, violate copyright here. I'm not going to just read the book to you. If you want to read the book, get it yourself. What I'm showing on screen, however, is freely given. So what I can show you, you can find it. It's on wisdomlibrary.org, wisdomlive.org. Feel free to visit them. There's a lot of things that I found difficult to find into translations of. They're just there for free if you want to read them. They're just divided into nice little categories too. So we're going to be looking at the translation from Wisdom Library today. I find this part a little bit funny because you have Madama Kakarika, Madama Kavatara, which is Kandrakiri's commentary of this, okay? Oh no, what's this? This is Kandrakiri's commentary of his own commentary of this. Like, not only do people commentate on commentaries, that's very, very common in Tibetan Buddhism. People comment, they're what's called auto-commentaries. There's a name for them because it's so common. I just find this, because it's like you write this, which is a line-by-line description of this, and then you write this, which is a description of what you were thinking when you were writing the line-by-line description of it. Believe me, some of this stuff is complicated enough that you need to just do that. But Ocean of Reasoning is the main other commentary we're going to be using. It's a historical commentary. It's not a modern day one. We're specifically going to be looking at the 2006 translation of the year 1400 commentary of this by Tsongkhapa again. I said he's the guy who wrote the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. I don't think it's a controversial statement at all. Like I said, it's really difficult to make blatant statements about Buddhism. Here's one I think I can make. Tsongkhapa was a good author who probably knew what he was talking about. Like that's such a mild take. I really wish, I want to find the person who disagrees with me on that. Like, who says that Tsongkhapa doesn't know what he's talking about. But generally his works aren't that easy to read, but his commentaries are very good. And at least he gives you enough information to give you what he was trying to get at when he's commenting. He almost gives you enough information to disagree with him sometimes. Not that I generally do. So let's get into this. So this is the Sanskrit. Oh, it doesn't start with the... Okay. So we're going to do something a little different. This starts with chapter 1, but chapter 1 is not the beginning. I understand chapter 1 is the beginning of the content of it, but there's a little more than that. There's the little introductory segment. Where is it? It's the dedication, the dedicatory verse. So let's read that. I don't have it up on the screen. You'll just have to believe me. I salute the fully enlightened one, the best orators, who taught that the doctrine of dependent origination, according to which there is neither cessation nor origination, neither annihilation nor the eternal, neither singularity nor plurality, neither the coming nor the going, by the auspicious cessation of hypostasization. That's like the noun of like making hypostasy. I'm gonna have to look this one up. What is this specifically? How do I say it and what does it mean? Hypostasize, to treat something as a concrete reality. Okay, so it's forming a thing in your head and treating it as if it's concrete. So this is a pretty clear dedicatory verse in the sense that you're saying, my work has value because I am dedicating it to the fully enlightened one, Buddha, basically. I am doing this because this is a dedication to someone that you already agree with. So obviously you should agree with me. That's a pretty good strategy. I actually like that. But he goes into a little bit more of a description of what he says that the Buddha taught, what the point of this paper is going to be, which is that according to dependent origination, there is neither cessation nor origination. Things don't stop and things don't start. There is neither annihilation nor eternal. Things are not destroyed and things are not forever. There's neither singularity or plurality. Looking as if there are many things that exist, looking as if there's only one thing exists. Neither of those are wrong. Things don't come or go, even dharmas, which is going to be a little bit of a criticism by the Abhidharma people. So let's move into what this actually says on your screen, which is very, very concise. No thing anywhere is ever born from itself, from something else, or from both, or from without cause. Okay, so I have a lot to say about this because this is extremely concise for what it's going to mean. This is a 4-part argument that you will see again and again, which is to say, you say a thing cannot do A, it cannot do B, it cannot come from A and B, and it cannot come from neither A nor B. So what you're basically doing is you're covering all your bases. You're saying if A is not a good explanation and B is not a good explanation, then therefore something that involves both of them can't work. And in fact, if you don't have A or B, you're saying that something is causeless, which is ridiculous. Because if things could appear without causes, then why aren't they everywhere? Why doesn't everything happen without a cause? So here's a better description of it would be this, which is I like this rendering a little better. Not from itself, not from another, not from both, nor without cause. Never in any way has any existing thing ever arisen. Because we're talking about conditions in this chapter. We're talking about things that cause other things. Because, okay, maybe I should start with this one. This is probably a good description, which is this. Let's see. Is it this one or is it... Okay, a sustained critique of both reification and nihilism, a rejection of the concept of essence. It's basically talking about the idea that, at least Abby, we'll get into it in a second, but we're not saying that the thing can't exist at all. What we're saying, we're almost like arguing semantics. We're saying that if a thing has an essence, almost like in a Platonist term, if you believe that fire is not just a description of conditions by a person, if fire has an independent existence, there must be something like the essence of fire. There must be fireness, and we must be able to describe when fireness is present and when fireness is absent. When fire is present, there is fire, and when fire isn't present, there isn't fire. So it's reasonable to ask, okay, so I take a stick and I light it, and fire happens. Where did the fire come from? And well, there's several different examples you can do. You can say a fire is born from itself, that the nature of fire exists in the wood and simply expresses, it causes itself when the conditions are met. You can say that no, the essence of fire did not exist in the wood. The essence of, presumably, wood exists in the wood, and it transformed into fire. So it came from something else. So if fire always exists and just manifests, that's a thing is born from itself. If fire does not exist but comes from wood, that's from something else. If you have this idea that fire exists in some capacity in the wood, but also the wood needs to be there, so like maybe from both, or maybe you believe that no, fire just appears as if magically from somewhere else. It just does. It comes without cause. That's the way it works. That would be without cause. So Nagarjuna is saying all of those are ridiculous. It can't possibly work. So this next segment is described as, we're going to get into what the alternative is, but this book is a lot about what is ridiculous. So once you eliminate all the ridiculous parts, you'll end up with something that is their argument. It's basically like reductio ad absurdum. Oh, you believe in essences? If so, you must believe this. Oops, that's ridiculous. So that can't be true, kind of thing. It's a pretty reasonable argument strategy. Okay, so this is described as, this next section, I have to pull this up over here. What do I have over here? I have a Discord notification. I'd prefer this to not be here. Yeah, there we go. So we now have the second. Oh no, that went away. That's not good. Let's fix that. There we go. We have the second verse, which is that there are four conditions. And once again, this is not the most clear translation. It's probably a very literal translation. Okay, so keep in mind, this is not something that Nagarjuna is saying. This is the view of the person he's arguing to. The book does not make this very clear. So he basically walked up to a guy and said, nothing ever can exist. And the person responded, there are four conditions: causes, objects, immediate, and dominant. There is no fifth. Which is to say, the intrinsic nature of... Let's see. No, sorry. This is the... Oh, this is organized a little differently. Let's try this. Let's try this one more time. This is, there are four conditions: causes, objects, immediate, and dominant. There is no fifth. That would be this part. There are four conditions: the primary cause, the objective support, the proximate condition, and the dominant condition. There is no fifth condition. That's a better way to say this, where what they're talking about is if things did exist, if you were a person who disagreed with Nagarjuna, you'd say, no, there's things that cause things, there's things that need to be true for the things to happen, then there's we're talking about the condition that you're causing. There are both proximate and dominant conditions. You can describe everything according to this framework. We don't need to, Nagarjuna, we disagree with you, is basically what this person is saying. To go a little further though, since Nagarjuna said that there's four possible ways, we are saying that, well, which one are they agreeing with here? Origination is by means of action. Let's see. So what this person is saying, they disagree with the first, third, and fourth of what he said, but they don't disagree with the second. Things can't come from themselves, sure. things can't come from themselves and something else. Well, I already said they can't come from themselves, so I also disagree with that. They can't come from nothing. We got you there. Things can't come from other things. Disagree with you. So this is the point that the Abhidharmists are trying to make. That no, things can totally come from something else. Haven't you ever started a fire? Haven't you ever put together something from pieces? Like, obviously they can come from something else. Things exist. So let's move down a bit. And then Nagarjuna says, the essence of things does not exist in conditions. If a thing does not exist on its own, then another thing also does not exist. Let's see. An action does not possess conditions, nor is it devoid of conditions. Conditions are not devoid of action, neither are they provided with action. So he's saying that if you were producing an ultimately real entity, something with intrinsic nature, there has to be some kind of change going on. And he's basically saying that, like, the essence of things does not exist in conditions. Just by doing the thing that causes the change, that doesn't answer where the essence is coming from. Like it still has to come from somewhere. This is a little more of his argument. There is no activity which has conditions. There is no activity which does not have conditions. There are no conditions which do not have to have activity, none of which have activity. So he's basically just saying that the thing we're looking for can't possibly exist in the conditions you're describing. I look for it and I don't find it. He's going to go a little more deep into like what he means, but that's essentially his point there. Since something is born independent on them, they are known as conditions. As long as it is not born, why are they not non-conditions? This is a little bit more confusing. So he's basically saying if something arises in terms of conditions, it's not really arising, is it? It's not really like a thing with essence that is making the thing what it is. So there's an argument, we'll probably get into it later, but basically the way the Abhidharmists see emptiness is they agree that certain dharma in this case means almost anything, like we literally say thing. Certain things are empty of independent existence, but certain things aren't empty of independent existence. And what they give is a chariot, which is an object that you put together. You make the pieces and you fit it together and you can take it apart. When part of it breaks, you put in another piece and it's still a chariot. But if you take the pieces apart, they say the chariot has no independent existence, but that the individual parts do. Or at least the material used to make the parts. That there is the idea of things that are real is possible. But the problem is that when we look at our life, we treat things that aren't real as if they were real. And Nagarjuna is trying to go a little farther and saying, by that logic, nothing has independent existence. Yes, the problem is we're treating unreal things as real, but also that's everything. Like, yes, it wouldn't be called a chariot if no one was around to look at it. It's just a thing that has a purpose, so we give it a convenient name. But that's also fire, right? Like, it's when you get down to it, fire is not made of fire. You can't go to the store and get a cup of fire. It's like a process, but it's a specific process that has a specific use, so we give it a specific name. And as you start looking at things, you start wondering, like, oh, that's everything, isn't it, right? So that's eventually going to form into the idea of a two-part model of reality, which is that things conventionally exist. This is really big. This is the thing that, oh, hi, Mari. Am I hurting your brain? I'm so sorry if I am. There'll be Animal Crossing after this, Mari, I promise. If you're good, you'll get ice cream. Okay, good. Thank you. This is, I was in a idea. Oh, I was just going to say that, basically the idea of things created out of convenience to have for the usefulness of language, to be able to communicate with each other. Like, that's kind of everything. Like the very classic Chinese one is like, the mountain exists. The mountain doesn't exist. Or it's like before Enlightenment. The mountain doesn't exist. The mountain exists. Like during Enlightenment, the mountain doesn't exist. After enlightenment, the mountain exists. And what they're saying is basically before you think about it, you look at a mountain and go, that's a mountain. And then when you think about it way too much, you go, actually, a mountain is just assemblages of different rocks. It's the Earth's crust pushed up. It's like, it's not a one thing. It's a whole bunch of things. The mountain isn't real. And then you realize when you're talking to people that sometimes it's really useful just to call it a mountain. Sometimes when a person says, hey, look at that mountain, they really don't need you to go, actually, it's not real. They know it's fine. It's like, it's helpful to understand the view of emptiness, but things still conventionally exist. You don't get to walk through walls because you stubbornly say, actually, these walls are just made of other aggregates. They're not real. Yeah, someone put them together. Don't get too full of yourself. That's kind of how I interpret the two forms of the truth, the conventional and ultimate. Let's move to the next one. Since a dharma does not operate, that would be this one over here. It would be this one. When things cannot be established as either existent, non-existent, or both, how can one speak of an establishing cause? Such things would be impossible. I don't like that much. Since a dharma does not operate, whether existent, non-existent, or both existent and non-existent, how in that case can it be called an operative cause? So what he's saying is, because the idea of a dharma, of like an essence of a thing, does not do anything. Like if you have this thing that's like perfectly existent, self-existent, and nothing ever comes from it, nothing can ever cause it, then it can't be said to do anything worthwhile. It cannot be the cause of anything. It cannot be the reason for anything. It's worthless. So he's basically saying, when you say that the essence of fire creates fire, and then you say, well, the essence of fire can't really come from anything or do anything, then it's not causing the fire. It's worthless. Such a thing would be impossible, which I think is a reasonable argument. Let's look at 8. An existent phenomenon is clearly said to have no object at all. If a phenomenon has no object, where can such an object exist? Or in another way, then why posit such an object in support of a cause without any sort of objective support? If there's this thing that doesn't do anything and you can't see it and it doesn't do anything, like it's completely worthless, why are you bringing it up at all? Why are you talking about dharmas as if they exist if they don't do anything? It's like, yeah, that's fair. And a little more clear, if a phenomenon is not born, it is invalid for it to cease. Therefore, as an immediate condition, it's unreliable. If it's ceased, it can't be like bornless. Basically, this idea of this perfect, immaculate thing that does nothing is kind of worthless. It makes more sense to think of that as just empty. The dharma as an explanation, or certain dharmas being really true in and of themselves, doesn't seem worthwhile. Because existence of existenceless things does not exist, it's incorrect to say when this exists, that arises. So basically, you can't just say that there is a thing that is real, and that is the thing that holds your entire worldview together. That there are some real things, we just can't point to them. Since things are devoid of intrinsic existence, this exists, that comes to be. That can never hold. Come up with a better description of how things exist then. There is no effect at all in the conditions, individually or together. How can that which is not in the conditions be born from the conditions? So this is going back to his argument for the 4 ways that something could potentially exist. When he said first of them was from itself. And that would be the idea that fire exists in the wood until we do certain conditions to bring it out. So he's saying that fire can't exist. It does not exist in the thing. It does not exist in the conditions because it would already be on fire. Like the thing that identifies fire is fire. There's not magical fire essence in there that you're just bringing out because it would already be on fire. We'd have no reason to light it. If the effect is not there, so this is a slightly different version of it. If the effect doesn't exist in the physical object, it in fact exists in the conditions. Which is to say, the fire essence lives in the act of starting a fire. why is an effect not born from what are not? So basically, I interpret this as saying, if fire exists in the conditions, but not in the fuel, then why can I not just strike a flint and have fire appear? If the fire essence only exists in the action, then why can I not produce fire from just like the air? That doesn't seem to work. Why is an effect not born when what are not its conditions? That's kind of a little bit just like hard to describe. Conditions do not have its own nature. How can those effects, what do not have their nature, be the nature of conditions? He's just getting like very picky here about where this thing you insist exists actually exists. If the product consists of the conditions, but the conditions don't consist of anything, how can the product of things that don't consist of anything actually consist of anything? He's basically like, if you're saying that the conditions don't matter, but it's happening. By the act of doing it, some magical self-existence is slipping in there and causing a thing that really truly exists, we promise. What? Like that's kind of incoherent. Where is it? Where is it? He's like asking for you like the timestamp, basically. Like, show me where it happened. And then at the very end, he has a summary. Therefore, I'm just gonna read the other translation of this. Therefore, neither a product consisting of conditions, nor one consisting of non-conditions exists. If a product does not exist, how can there be a condition or a non-condition? So he's kind of saying the same thing two different ways. He's saying a thing is not made up of just conditions, and the conditions on their own cannot cause the thing. So it doesn't seem like there's some sort of magical causative thing in there. Nothing can really be said here. That's basically what it is. So this entire argument here is about conditions, which is that if you say this thing exists, where does it come from and what does it do? And the answer kind of that he's come up with is it comes from nowhere, goes nowhere, and does nothing by its nature. And something that cannot be observed and does nothing, it comes from nothing and goes nowhere. Like, that's not a real object. That's literally nothingness. You're describing nothing. If it does nothing, comes from nothing, and never goes anywhere. Right, yeah, like it doesn't seem like a worthwhile way to describe how things happen. It seems like you're just describing emptiness, is my understanding. So that's the chapter I am most familiar with. So we're gonna have an interesting time. Let me just go back a little bit. Investigation of coming and going. Here we go. Just organize that there so people know what I'm looking at. Oh, I should look at what Tsongkhapa had to say about that. Actually, that first chapter, yeah. Let's look at Ocean of Reasoning. Let's look at what a commentary many hundreds of years later has to describe, and we'll see if it's anywhere close to what I was able to get. That's a fun one. Before we move on to the second one, let's really get the stuff out of the first. Get everything we could possibly understand. Possibly by having someone who knows what they're talking about talk about it. Ocean of Reasoning, Section 1. That would be this page. It's a little bit too far. Okay. The internal and external phenomenon, which is a synonym of anything, indicating these phenomena are based on something else, never arise in any spatial, temporal, or metaphysical location, represented by anywhere that can exist, any place, any location. Therefore, the word... Okay, so he's basically saying it could never happen. There's no place that these things you think of could exist. Anything, whatever, that ever arises, neither from... This is basically just the first thing again. Neither from self nor from other, neither from both nor from neither. It's that four-part argument again. If arising existed through essence, then one should accept any of the four alternate arisings as proof of existence. Therefore, this is the argument for if something did exist, it would have to exist in one of these four ways. Not from self. Do they give a really good description of this? Let's see. There are two kinds of negation. External negation is having explicitly eliminated the object of negation. No phenomenon is projected or established. For instance, if one asked, is it appropriate for a Brahmin to drink alcohol? One replies, it is not. This eliminates the idea. But this does not say whether he drinks something else. So eliminations are specific? This seems to be just like a description of how people argue. Okay, so this is kind of like the way that people get into classifications a little bit. It's the difference between an argument saying that this is not something that, like, Brahmins do not drink alcohol. Therefore, if you drink alcohol, you are not a Brahmin. And then there's another way of saying, like, if I say someone is not a Brahmin, therefore I have made statements about them, like going the other way around. So external negation is saying, because someone does not do something, I see you do something, therefore you are not this group. And the internal negation is, because I see that you are not this group, or because you are this group, I have learned something about you. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like Boolean logic in a way, a little bit. It reminds me of some sort of like Greek and Roman logic. Oh, my neck hurts, 1 second. Oh. Let's just see. I want to get into specifically Tsongkhapa's commentary. All of these inferences merely have the effect of refuting the conclusions of others. In other words, it's like this entire thing is specifically about telling the Abhidharmists that he does not like their interpretation. I really like how like plain this commentary is. It's like the effect of explicitly refuting the conclusions of others. Yes. Phenomena that have the characteristic of being mutually exclusive and exhaustive are such that the negation of one is not possible without the affirmation of other. Therefore, it makes no sense to conceive of something belonging to neither of a pair of mutually exclusive categories. Okay, so that's an argument against, if you say that something comes from A or B, it doesn't make sense to say that they can come from both. Like, once you negate that A or B isn't true, the idea of A and B is also not true. Oh, thanks for the follow, Lauren. Nice. Are you enjoying the philosophy? This is Fridays, by the way. This is Fridays for the foreseeable future. I will be attempting to extract use from this. I am not the smartest person, but I will attempt to get something out of this. The impossibility of the existence of that which is affirmed without the non-existence of what? This seems to just be like describing. That's fine. There, you know, I think honestly, I like the way this chapter is laid out. The argument is laid out entirely at the start. And there's enough arguments in there to really support it in the way that he kind of goes overboard. So if you miss a little bit, I don't think you're like, thanks for being here at all, Val. Like, I know you're like, you have work, you're working from home, but still, that's still a, I would never ask someone to do that. That's quite impressive. Come on, I want to get to word for word what we got here. Okay. So we're going to talk about Samkhayas, which is a specific philosophical, like, seeing. I believe it's sort of like similar to what the Abhidharmists see, where they see some things as external. They see some things as independently existing. It is not tenable that internal phenomenon such as the eye, or external phenomenon such as sprouts, arise unless they already exist at the time of their causes. Consequently, they maintain that things exist within them in an unmanifested form, at such a time which causes embryos and seeds, and arise from them. They do not maintain that they arise after being manifested. So he's basically, this is a person who says, that things always exist, but they don't need to like re-manifest. They just exist in potential. And they use the idea of an embryo, and they use the idea of a seed. To refute this, however, this is basically Nagarjuna's argument. If things already exist in potential, if the plant already exists in the seed, what is the point of the plant? If a thing already exists, not just the potential to cause it, not just the ability to happen later with conditions, because we've already talked about that. If the thing exists in its entirety within the thing that it's going to come from, then that's like purposeless. You're saying that fire literally exists in Tinder already. So I can just hold it up to my face and be warm, I guess. That doesn't seem ridiculous. And then you also have to say, well, like, what about the things that caused the seed, right? Did the seed's potential exist in that? Yes. Did the plant's potential exist in the seed? Potential. Well, yes, because it came from the seed. Okay, what about what caused that? You basically just get an infinite regress, where like an infinite amount of essences have to exist in all things in order for anything to ever actually independently exist. To say more than a plant is an assemblage of cells that grows according to known factors, then there's just nothing more than that. Once again, trees conventionally exist. I like them. They provide shade. But we're talking about independent existence, as if there is a platonic idea of tree that somehow is having some sort of active effect on our world. I don't buy that. There's a Buddhist thing where they apply this to yourself. It's like anatta, which is no self, which is something that the Buddha said, but then didn't super elaborate on. So there's a lot of different texts to describe, like someone coming up to you and being like, you don't exist. It's kind of a little upsetting when there's not a ton of description around it. So you kind of have to make that make sense. This idea kind of applies exactly to people. One of the ways that it's actually kind of a thing that I thought of before I really read this, which doesn't make me special or anything, but it's the idea of if a soul exists, let's say, a soul in the sense of not just like, okay, I could believe that there is some sort of non-physical part of us, but that's all it would be, right? It would just be a part. It would happen when we were born, and maybe it would go away when we die. It'd be some kind of emanation of our body, and it would be some kind of non-physical thing. But that's not what a lot of religions say the soul is. They say you are the soul. The soul is you. It's your you-ness. When you die, the soul goes on. The soul is able to do all the things that you do because you have a body, you are a soul. That's how I've heard it described, at least in Catholicism sometimes. But if that was true, there would have to exist inside you a you-ness. There would have to be a thing in you that embodies all the things that you are. But I don't know about you, but I'm not the way I was a couple years ago. Like that you-ness is not fixed. There's not like a magical homunculus that sits in my head and pulls levers and does things according to like Lordness. It seems a lot more that I'm just some kind of thing that came due to factors. I'm made of identifiable parts. I do things because it's been my experiences. It's because it's the way I've learned them. It's because of the aggregates I picked up along the way. And, that's just me. That there doesn't have to be a, special soul up there. I suppose if I have one, I'll feel really embarrassed. That would be very funny. I die and I'm just like, well, shit. But whatever. I'm willing to take the risk on that one. If I'm wrong, I think it'll just be really funny. Actually, that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, I'm not dead. Oh, awesome. This rules actually. But anyway, yeah, I see this kind of as similar to the arguments they use to say no self. And some people find that a little bit depressing. They describe Buddhism as nihilistic because they're saying that not only does nothing exist, you're not even real. But we still conventionally exist. You can still talk to me. I'm still here. I'm talking right now. But also, that implies that there's no like fixed perfect self in you. Like, people say, like, I'm just that way. That's the way I do things. That's the way you do things, but that's not necessarily the way you are, right? You can be anything, right? Like, yeah, you're not good at this thing right now, but that's not a judgment for like how, like I wasn't born with artistic ability. That's why I'm not an artist. No, it's because I didn't put the time in learning how to draw. I'm terrible at art by my own devices. Maybe some people start with a little bit of natural talent, but like, you could get there if you tried, right? I kind of see it as positive in a way. They're saying that there's no fixed thing that's limiting you to be exactly what you are. People can change over time. Systems can evolve. And I like that personally. I really need to just bring up the picture of the like 90s kid with the sunglasses and the skateboard, where it's like how people think nihilism is. Oh, things don't exist. And it's like how nihilism actually is. And it's just like, it rules. Hell yeah. You know, it's great. I can do whatever I want. I get to choose why things are meaningful, not because they have some sort of independent thing. Yeah, exactly. Like, it seems happy to me, but some people get very caught up on it. Are we up for another chapter? You want to try chapter 2? Specifically about, let's see. That would be about coming and going. I think so. I want to try it. My brain doesn't hurt too bad yet. That's the thing, is eventually I'm going to reach a point where, yeah, okay. Do your best, Val. Like, don't compromise your job. Like seriously, there are VODs if you want to see this. Not only are there VODs, I put my stuff up on YouTube like the day after. Like today when my stream started, yesterday's VODs were posted. If you go to my YouTube, you'll be able to see all this. It'll be in a special playlist called Let's Learn. You can literally just like watch them all in a row. Don't worry about it. It's fine. People have lives. But thank you very much for showing up. And also for anyone else that's here, I will continue on after this, and I'll probably play some Animal Crossing, probably for a while, given that we got that bug net, and I'll just try to earn some money. Maybe get a start on my next house loan. I don't know how much it is. I might look it up and try to make that amount of money. Okay, chapter 2. Let's pull this up over here. It's described as an investigation of coming or going, or more specifically, more flowery, an analysis of the traversed, the not yet traversed, and the presently being traversed. This commentary describes it as the topic of this chapter is motion. Okay. So I believe we're starting again with a very similar, where it starts with an argument and then a counter argument. Then there is no going in what is gone. There is no going also in what has not yet gone. Motion is unknowable apart from gone and have not gone. Once again, that's very literal and very unhelpful. So let's say, just as the path traversed is not being traversed, neither is the path not yet traversed being traversed. The path being presently traversed is distinct from the portions of the path that have already been done and have not yet been done. So he's kind of trying to draw a distinction. Oh, hey, Nai. Hi, how are you doing, by the way? Do you like this? Is this good? Is this Nycore? Is what I'm doing right now Nycore? I'm going to say no. So he's trying to draw, if things move, it should be possible to say where they are moving. Which is to say, you can say that things have already moved, and you can say that things have already are going to move in the future. But it's kind of like that. It's almost like the what is it? The paradox of the turtle. It's like, in order to have traveled, you have to travel half that amount. It's like infinite regress. He's like asking very specifically, where does the present exist? I can point to the past and I can talk about the future, but where is this thing actually happening? If you're saying that in the motion of something, this motion is independently real, It has an independent existence. It's absolutely moving for real. It's not just a description of things, a thing that has happened, or you're trying to find like essence in it. Then it should be able to point to it specifically. So, once again, this is the opponent describing it. Movement occurs in the path of the being presently traveled. Movement does not exist in the past, it does not exist in the future, but it does exist in the present. Things really do move, things really do exist. Moving is within motion. It's kind of a tautology, but it's saying no, things do really move. So now we've got a response, which is, how is an act of going that is in the path of being traversed? When does it hold that there is not... How is it possible within motion? A motion like not... He's saying a motion of not moving is not possible. That's a little bit hard to understand. I mean, it makes sense. It's like, what are you doing? Nothing. You can't be said to be doing nothing and say you're still doing anything. I get that. I'm having trouble feeling how this is related to how that's before. So if something is really moving, there must be a present action of going. I don't necessarily buy this argument. I like the first argument a lot better. So let's see if this argument explains itself a little better, or maybe I'm not smart enough to get this one. For whomever there's going within motion, for him it will follow there could be no going within motion, because there's going... To claim that there's going within motion... If you say that the act of the path is being being traversed, it would follow that the path being traversed is without the act of going. I don't like this one at all. Yeah, this argument seems a lot more incoherent. He's like trying to split it really far and say basically like you can never point to a time when an action is actually occurring. That if you say that like the act of going really exists, you kind of have to say that it doesn't exist anywhere. But that seems very... I don't know, the other one seems like it's a good argument. This one kind of seems like you're just using like, oh, the present doesn't really exist. You're kind of seems very smoke screeny. I don't like this one. Maybe the commentary will help me understand this one, because I am not getting it. I'm not getting it at all. So let's just scroll down. And we're not in examination of conditions, we'd be in examination of motion. Examination of motion, okay. Tsongkhapa, please help me. I don't understand what this is saying. Really, like I don't. Oh my god, his explanation is so long. Oh, maybe that's good. Maybe that's good. Maybe I'll understand what the hell's going on. Okay. Okay, there's a big paragraph here. Okay. This is another way to describe this is another translation of the first section. Where one has gone, one does not go. Where one has not yet gone, one does not go. Apart from where one has gone and where one has not gone, that over which one goes cannot be conceived. So he's basically saying, once again, that the present moment doesn't seem to be something you can specifically point to. Okay, how does that help your argument? If the activity of going existed inherently, it would have to be there somewhere in one of the three intervals. This is not tenable. Okay? The aspect of the interval path. The now indicates the temporal... You're just getting very specific into what now means. I think I understand what now means. I never turned my fan on. Okay, I'm just sitting here sweating and wondering why I'm not comfortable. No. This one. Give me a second. I'll be right back. The fan I just turned on, of course, does not ultimately exist, but I'm very glad it conventionally exists because, man, like, this room is not the coolest part of my apartment, and also I'm sitting right next to my computer, so yeah. Let's move back to that. Let's move back to the study screen. There we go. I have a feeling I'm just not going to like this argument. I have a feeling that the answer is that the first chapter is like, yes, I like it a lot. I mean, to be fair, this book is basically just 27 chapters explaining why his thing is true. Just because I don't like some of the arguments doesn't really, you know, like, oh, this argument's not very elegant. I don't have an intuitive understanding of it. Okay, there's 26 more of them. It's like, good, perfect. Let's just see if we can get anything out of this. Oh, Jesus Christ. They're basically saying, actually not, oh Buddha, I suppose. So they're saying because the present moment doesn't exist, because you can never point to a moment where this thing is specifically taking place in like a real way, you can't really point to a moment where, because like if you're defining a thing by the action that it does, or like the time that it exists, you're saying there's a specific moment where this thing is doing a thing. There is a specific moment where the stick is catching on fire. And then he's saying, no, there's not really. You can point to before it's on fire and you can point to after it's on fire, but it's really hard to find that precise, infinitely small present in there. And so you're saying that if the action that you're saying gives it independent existence doesn't exist, then the thing can't have independent existence. That the idea of trying to use a time argument to describe why things exist isn't a very good choice for you. I mean, I agree. I don't necessarily like this form of argument. And he's saying there can be no third time. I believe that's his way of saying if the before and the after doesn't have it, there could be no other time. I can tell you right now, I'm gonna get through this and then we're gonna play Animal Crossing where I don't have to think. My brain just like finally hit the red line. The meter finally filled up and my brain is like, oh God, oh no. So yeah, we're definitely gonna be doing this in metered amounts slowly once a week to protect myself from the hazard that is philosophy. The brain damage associated with it. At least I experience it when I see this stuff. Nope, I don't like this one either. If the goer goes, it would follow that going would be twofold, which reveals the goer and no. I might have to read up on this one, and if I can find a reasonable explanation of this one, I'll tell you about it. If not, we'll just start with chapter 3 next time, and hopefully it won't be this time stuff. If the beginning doesn't exist and the end doesn't exist, how can the middle exist? There's like a metaphor here where it's like, if you don't put down your heel and you don't put down your toes, how can the middle of your foot be on the ground? That's not really like an argument. That's just a really funny image. I have to give them credit for that. Like, you're saying if the first and the last part aren't applicable here, how can the middle be? I don't know if I really judge that. How long does this go for? Oh my God. If things are not established as same and as different, no. Okay, so emergency Animal Crossing. Like, I can't make the philosophy go away. Please. I hit my limit. All these books I have open are being closed now. No. Ugh. Brain hurt. Head hurt. Philosophy bad. But also philosophy kind of cool.